So many of us are trying to lose weight or maybe just become healthier. Today, my guests will talk about setting some realistic goals and focus on a lifetime of good health. I'm Emily Blaze. You're listening and watching RAPLINE on GC 90.7 and GCTV. And welcome back to the show, Marcia Pell, registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to see you at the beginning of the year, and everybody's just consumed with getting healthier, possibly losing some weight. So let's start with New Year's resolutions. In general, in your experience, why do they fail, and about how many of us are making that resolution to lose weight?
Well, 45% of people make resolutions, New Year's resolutions. The number one resolution is about weight, and only 8% are successful. And I think the biggest problem really is that people try to do a whole lot at one time. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. You know, they try to change everything because it's the new year and it's just too much at once. And they have not planned for what's going to happen when things come up that get in the way. And so I think it's, I think those are the two things. And, everybody has a busy life and we just get off track and then it just all goes away.
So what are some ideas to keep on that resolution, and what are some trademarks of successful people?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to think, it's good to have a long-term goal, but then to break it down and what steps do you have to do to get there, and then just focus on the next step in front of you, and not try to do too many things at one time. The other thing would be know that things are going to come up that get in your way. I mean, that is going to happen. There's no two ways about it. And if you are prepared for it and you have a plan, a common thing would be people might try to be more active, in the new year. So they're going to walk. And then if they say, okay, well, some days the weather won't be good, and I know this is going to happen, and so on those days, this is what I'm going to do instead, and to have a plan. But, for a resolution to work and for change to really happen, it takes time and so much commitment. So I think the other thing would be when you, and it's normal to slide back. I mean, that's just part of it. And so if you realize, okay, this is going to happen, and ask yourself, in 5 years, if I continue to do what I've been doing as far as my new change, how will I feel? Because if you could get your emotions involved, that can be a real motivator. Whereas if I don't continue to do what I'm going to do, how am I going to feel? And most people don't keep the resolutions. So how does that make you feel? And that kind of thing can, to help people stay on track.
And so in your experience, the people that you've worked with, what do you know, or explain for us what clicks for them? Is there a specific words of wisdom or something that you can see that it just clicks, they get it, and they're on that path?
Well, I've had a couple different experiences. I've had people tell me when they got diabetes that was a wake-up call. I had people say, getting diabetes was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I was like, what? I was shocked. But then in talking to them, it scared them, and they started paying attention to their lifestyle for the first time. And so then they started feeling better because they were watching what they're eating, they were exercising. And so in that way, that's what they, that after digging, what in the world are you talking about? That's what I found out. And then another lady really stood out. She was an older woman in her 60s and lost like 30 pounds. That's a lot of weight to lose, and it's harder as you get older, So I asked her, I said, how did you do it? And this was somebody that I had worked with, but I wasn't working with her at the time. I mean, I saw her a few months later. And she said, I was following the Nancy diet, and her name was Nancy. So I was like, what do you mean by that? And she didn't listen to anybody outside of herself about what to do. she kind of learned from me what was healthy to do, and then she picked and chose what she was going to do based on all these different options. And then she just kept adding on. So, that just really stood out. And I like how she called it the Nancy diet.
Yeah.
But she just did a little bit at a time, but stuck with it and chose things that were meaningful to her that she was ready to change.
You are listening and watching RAPLINE on GC 90.7 and GCTV. And our guest today is Marcia Pell. She is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator. And you can find her at marciapell.com. So with all that being said, give us some ideas when we fall off the wagon, how not to just wallow in that despair. How do we get up on the horse again and carry on?
Well, I think the main thing is to not have black and white thinking. Just every day is a new opportunity to make good choices. Every meal is another opportunity. So if you don't beat yourself up and just be kind. I mean, we're so hard on ourselves sometimes, especially when we're trying to do these New Year's resolutions. But if we can just realize that every day is a new day and every meal is a new meal, and just try to choose your healthy options most of the time, and not to call yourself bad or things like that. Just I didn't make the healthiest choice that time, but now I'm going to choose better and then have in mind what your end goal is.
Now, of course, we mentioned your passion is diabetes and working with those that have diabetes. So what do those with diabetes need to consider if they would like to lose weight?
Well, really, people with diabetes need to do just about what everybody else would need to do. The only thing would be for exercise. Before someone with diabetes started any kind of an exercise plan, it would be good for them to check with their doctor to see if there's any limitations. I feel like most people could walk or do, some less strenuous things, but it's always a good idea if you have any medical condition to check with your doctor. And then just like for anybody, I don't think it makes sense to do these real drastic, extreme things. Somebody with diabetes who begins exercising, if they also decide they're going to cut their carb way down, they could have a low blood sugar and that type of thing. So just slow and steady and making healthy choices and fueling your body and just being consistent is really the huge part of it.
Something interesting I learned from a previous coworker who had diabetes. He would have a real high sugar. He'd test his blood. He'd have a real high sugar, and he would go walk for X amount of minutes and then test, and that blood sugar would be lowered. Is that common?
Yes, it's very common. Exercise can lower your blood sugar or your glucose. Your blood pressure can lower your cholesterol. It does like so many good things. One of my favorite other stories that's so memorable to me is this lady who had diabetes about a long time, 15 years. She was on 3 different medications for the diabetes, which is common, and her blood sugars were still not controlled, so she was going to have to go on insulin, and she really didn't want to go on insulin. So she had heard forever that she should exercise, but she did not like it, so she didn't do it. And at this point where she was facing insulin, she says, "Can I give exercise a try?" And they said, okay, And so she really realized how much walking, which she hated, brought down her blood sugar. And she started walking for 10 minutes after each meal and was able to put off going on insulin.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was funny, though, because how she had heard forever that she should do it, but it wasn't until she was faced with going on insulin, and everybody's different. Everybody's diabetes is different. But for her, walking 10 minutes brought her blood sugars down 30 and 40 points for just 10 minutes, and she still hated it.
But
she didn't care because she didn't want to go on the insulin, so it worked out.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great story. So with all that, describe for us what a healthy diet consists of.
Well, a healthy diet consists of fruits and vegetables, whole grains or grains, but half of them should be whole grains.
Explain for us what the difference between grains and whole grains.
Okay, so grains are anything that is like wheat or barley, rice. They grow in a field. It's a grain. And whole grain, when you eat a whole grain, you get all the parts to the grain. So the outer covering on the grain is called the bran, and then there's the endosperm, which is the main part of the grain, and then the germ. And so when you eat all the parts, like oatmeal is an example of a whole grain, popcorn is whole grain, where you get all the parts, you get the most nutrients.
Oh, okay.
So wheat, brown rice, wheat, you could get whole wheat where they just get the whole wheat berry and use all of it, or you could take the bran and the germ and throw it away, and then you would have it wouldn't be whole grain anymore. The same thing as with white rice versus brown rice.
Okay.
They both have the endosperm, but the brown rice has the bran and the germ intact, and the white rice has it taken out. And then when you lose nutrients that way, you might see the word enriched on a label. Enriched means they put some of the nutrients back in that they knew they took out when they processed it. So in general, the less processed, the better, because you're going to get all the nutrients.
So look for the whole grains.
Whole grain, right. Now, white rice is not going to kill you. There's so much hype about nutrition out there. I've heard a lot about, white rice. It sounds like they're poison. They're not poison. It's just that brown rice has more nutrients, and, it's always a better choice. So that's the difference in those. And the recommendation is half of your grains should be whole grain.
Okay.
So it's okay to have not everything be whole grain, but that is a good choice.
And so we were going over that, what a healthy diet consists of.
Right.
And so the whole grains, the grains, and what else?
And then fruits, the best fruits are going to be whole fruit, where you get the most fiber, versus fruit juice, which is okay. But fruit juice, a little bit, it's easy to overdo juice, and it's got a lot of sugar and not as much fiber. So I find that when we eat, we feel more satisfied than drinking our calories. And then vegetables, with vegetables, you just have to watch what you put on them.
Right.
Not the cheese sauce and the creams and the gravy and, that kind of thing. So that's 3 of the 5 food groups. Another one is the protein group, and the best choices there are going to be a wide variety. It's recommended to have some vegetarian meals and use things like soy protein, or nuts or beans are all good sources of protein, as well as your lean meats, fish, chicken, and even beef and pork, but you want to use your leanest cuts of those.
Okay. And is it recommended, as you're talking about the beef and the pork, is there a recommended portions per week? Or
Well, my favorite tool, and the website is excellent, is choosemyplate.gov, because it shows the plate, and it has, about a quarter of the plate should be that protein group. And I like it because it's visual and it's just easy to understand. So we need protein, it'd be good to get protein at like the 3 meals a day, but we don't need very much. And a lot of people have heard a deck of cards is the right amount. That works for a lot of people. My favorite thing to use is the palm of your hand, because I've worked with some people that are 6 feet 3 inches tall, and their palm is not the size of a deck of cards, but they need more protein, and they're bigger, so their palm probably works for them. So I like that personally better.
You are listening and watching RAPLINE here on GCTV and GC 90.7. We're talking about eating healthy and a lifetime of good health. My guest is registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator, Marcia Pell. As you were talking about, maybe someone taller or bigger needs more than someone who's, say, 5'2" or something. So with that being said, what does our body need to actually function?
Well, we just need a wide variety. The 3, big nutrients are protein, carbohydrate, and fat. They all do different things. And then we need these little nutrients called vitamins and minerals. And the best way to get them is from our food. And the more natural the food is, I think the better chance that we're going to get everything. Just like I was saying about the grains. The thing with the vegetables is the more color, the better. So we often think about a rainbow of vegetables. Leafy green things are different from orange vegetables like carrots and sweet potatoes, which are different from starchy. So the more color on your vegetables, the better chance you're going to get everything.
I love the red and yellow bell peppers. What is good in there for me?
Well, they just have some different nutrients that are unique to those. I forget exactly what it's called. It's been a long time.
Good.
Since, yes. The more, you can kind of go by the color to get. They're kind of like leafy green is different from cabbage and broccoli, and they have some different nutrients than sweet potatoes and carrots. So just the more variety, the better. Same thing with fruits.
And so as we're talking about the vegetables, is there a difference between like fresh, frozen, canned?
A little bit. Most people don't get anywhere near enough vegetables, so I don't want people to think that it has to be like straight out of the garden or it's not good. But the canned tend to have more sodium, but now they have a lot more products that are lower sodium. In America, we eat way too much sodium. But there are some lower sodium options. Frozen works great because they're frozen close to the time that they're picked, so they're actually very healthy. But you just want to get the ones without the added sauces because they're going to have more salt and fat and stuff added to it. But probably ideal would be in your backyard, straight out of your garden. But any vegetables, just eat vegetables. Any kind of way you can get them, really.
Yeah, okay. So can foods or lack of food, can that affect how we perform or how, we think, mental capabilities, that sort of thing?
There's been a lot of studies with kids in school or people at work that don't eat breakfast are just not as sharp. So definitely it can have an impact. And a lot of people, when they start eating healthier, sometimes they don't realize they don't feel good until they start feeling good. That's pretty common. And then they're like, wow, I just didn't realize how bad I felt when I was not eating so healthy. And so it makes a difference, but it's a little subjective.
So with that, say someone who begins eating healthier, and they stay on that road, approximately when would they start feeling the effects of eating healthier?
I think it probably varies from person to person, but a lot of times emotionally people feel better right away because they just know they're taking care of their body. And so that's a big, that's huge. Those feelings that we have about what we're doing just makes a big difference. So I've known people that, I can say for myself, my husband and I, we exercise regularly, but we never feel like going. And we're always so glad we go, so like right away, we're glad we went. But I think the same thing can happen with healthy eating. When you're taking care of yourself, that's good for your whole family, and it just automatically you feel good.
And maybe that kind of fuels the other behaviors.
Absolutely.
If mentally you're feeling like I'm eating well, this is a good choice I made.
I have a lot of people, when they eat well, then they're motivated to exercise, and then they're motivated to do the next thing. Yeah, it just all feeds on each other.
And so are there some good resources for people who want to just learn more about healthy eating in general?
My favorite really is that website,
okay,
choosemyplate.gov. They have recipes. They have trackers where you can track, like, are you getting enough fruits? Are you getting enough vegetables? They have links to other sites that have other good information. I mean, I think with that one site, you can just get pretty much what you need for healthy eating.
Right.
And it's all based on science. It's based on it's all based on our most current research. So that's where I would go.
The ChooseMyPlate.gov.
Right. They have a section for kids. So if you want to know, like, what should my kid eat, they've got that. But pretty much kids need to eat what everybody needs to eat, because we all need pretty much the same nutrition. Their portions would be different. And kids are kind of tricky.
Yeah.
You know, they're kind of tricky as far as how do you get them to eat it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother topic, but just real quick, I think they should be provided healthy food, 3 meals, snacks in between. They need to be offered healthy food based on that food guide pyramid 6 times a day by the caregiver, okay? So the adult decides what it is they need and put it in front of them. And then the kid's responsibility is to eat it or not. And that's it. And eat however much they want.
Yeah.
If you divide that responsibility that way, I think that works really good, because if a kid is going to eat if they're hungry, and they're not going to eat if they're not hungry. And the adult doesn't really know when that is. So you give them the opportunity to eat healthy foods, and then just let them eat however much. Now, if they don't eat anything, that's fine, because 2 or 3 hours later, you're going to give them another opportunity.
Okay.
But it takes out a lot of this control, where kids, they really like to control things. And there's lots of times it just leads to a lot of fights between, somebody worrying about are they eating enough, and then they're not going to eat that because they want to turn around and eat junk food, and people worry about it. But anyway, it really is another whole topic. But there's very good things on that ChooseMyPlate.gov for any age.
And as we're talking about that government website, just last week there was some new health guidelines that the government put out. What's the biggest takeaway with that?
The new dietary guidelines for Americans, they are updated every 5 years, and they just came out last week. The biggest takeaway is, the key thing is, we have to eat healthy patterns of foods. It's not any particular nutrient or anything like that. We need to eat healthy patterns. Everything we eat and drink makes a difference. And we need to stay within our calorie range where we are at a healthy weight. So it's not... Anyway, that's kind of what it says. And it goes right along with that Choose My Plate.
Yeah. And I understand there was some information regarding sugar and
right.
cholesterol.
For the first time, they recommended no more than 10% of our no more than 10% of our calories to come from added sugar. We have a big problem. We eat way too much added sugar in this country. Now, one of the things that's still very difficult is when you look at a food label, you can't tell how much sugar is added. I mean, it'll tell how much sugar is in a product, but a lot of sugars are just naturally in foods, like milk has natural sugar and so does fruit. And those are very healthy foods, and those sugars are not really what the problem is. The problem is the sugar that's added to things, which would be your soft drinks.
Okay.
That's all 100% added sugar. There's nothing in there that you need. But right now, if you look at the label, you can't tell how much sugar is added and how much is just naturally in there. So that's a little tricky. But pretty much, if you stick to real foods in nature, that's a good thing. And then the extra, a lot of times we know the added sugars, candy, cookies, soft drinks, that kind of thing.
And what about the cholesterol?
Well, it used to be a guideline to limit foods that have dietary cholesterol in it. Now, dietary cholesterol is cholesterol that we eat, and it used to be thought that affected the cholesterol in our bloodstream, but the science doesn't show that, so they've taken that guideline out. So now, but we do know, excuse me, we do know that saturated fat is linked to elevated cholesterol in our bloodstream. So they no longer have any kind of recommendation about eggs.
Okay.
But we do want to also limit, other than the sugar, is saturated fat. And that's the kind of fat that mostly comes from animal foods.
From animal foods,
Yeah.
okay. Now, would that include cheese?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All
My
right.
favorite
My
food.
favorite, too.
Love cheese. But, it is my favorite food, and I'm going to eat it. And I think that's fine. I think that's part of healthy eating.
Yeah.
But what personally I do is I choose a sharp flavored cheese. I get by with not very much, and I limit how often I do it. But I do enjoy it. But it's going to be your animal food. So creams, whole milk, and even reduced fat milk has got quite a bit of fat in it. So it's recommended low fat or fat free. Cow's milk, lean cuts of meat. Those are the ways to cut the saturated fat.
Okay, and any tips on, as we're talking about milk products, the soy milks, the nut milks, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, it's recommended, these guidelines have recommendation for cow's milk and soy milk, fortified soy milk. Those nut milks are really just it's hardly any protein in it. So the soy milk and the cow's milk are your better choices.
Okay.
Unless you have allergies. I mean, there's always people that can't tolerate certain things. But the almond milk and those kind of things hardly have any protein, and so they're not as good of a substitute.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, Marcia, thanks so much for coming on RAPLINE and sharing with us about healthy eating.
You're welcome.
And again, you are listening and watching RAPLINE here on GCTV and GC 90.7. My guest, registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator, Marcia Pell. You can find more info at marciapell.com. And that is a wrap for this edition of RAPLINE. And thanks to Tom Hoots for engineering the show. A reminder, if you're thinking of adding a pet to your family, consider the adoption option. You can always check out our Pet of the Week on our Facebook page. For GC 90.7 FM, I'm Emily Blaze. Thanks for listening and watching, and have a great day.